Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. I think we'll make a start as we have, a session with some very interesting presentations, and also we want time to have questions and discussions as well. So welcome to Humanitarian Networks and Partnership Week 2025. This session is focused on housing, land and property solutions to address and prevent displacement. My name is Jim Robinson. I'm the co-coordinator of the Global Housing, Land and Property Area of Responsibility, which is part of the Global Protection Cluster, but works very closely with other clusters as well, and those working on solutions and development and longer term engagement on housing, land and property as well. The HLP AOR, as it's known, is co-led by Norwegian Refugee Council and UN Habitat, and we're very pleased to welcome you here to this session today, which is co-organised by the HLP AOR and with a lot of input from our colleagues at UN Habitat and the Global Land Tool Network as well. If you would like to introduce yourselves in the chat, it would be great to know who we have here. And just to let you know, we will be recording the session. I'm just going to mute whoever's microphone that is. Great. And if you would like to introduce yourselves in the chat, that'd be great to know who's here. We'll be recording the meeting to be able to sort of share the content later. So please bear that in mind. And when we get together online, I always think it's nice, if possible, if people can just put their cameras on to say hello at the beginning. I know that sometimes it's not possible to have our cameras on all the time, or it isn't possible right now. But if you can put your camera on just to say hello, it's always good to see who we have here, and put a face to the initials that we see in these circles. And good are some old friends as well that I've not seen for a little while. So that's lovely for me on a personal level to see who's here too. Great, nice to see you all, and thank you for joining. So today the session is going to explore case studies and key findings from UN Habitat's newly released report on policy directions, housing, land and property solutions to resolve and prevent displacement. And this is sort of underscoring the critical role of HLP rights in resolving and preventing displacement. So it's looking at how we respond to crises, but it's also thinking about what can we do to prevent displacement in the first time, and also how do we think longer term. So for a lot of you on the call, I know HLP and HLP rights will be familiar, but just to say for those where it might be a new kind of collection of letters, a new 3-letter acronym, HLP rights are about having a home safe from eviction, and also access to land that offers shelter and possibilities to secure livelihoods. So it's about the place that people live, it's the way they access and are able to use land, it's about what happens in crisis, but it's also about how we think about the longer term. So how do we ensure people can live as safely and securely when they're displaced or impacted by crisis or displacement, but also what can we do to support resilience and move towards solutions as well, where that's possible. And this session is going to look at those things, and we're going to feature some very interesting case studies from UNHCR, colleagues at the Red Cross and UN Habitat, focused on Greece, Ukraine and Syria. And then we'll build on those to prevent key findings from the report, pull things together, and look across the way that HLP issues are responded to, and how HLP solutions can really address some of these complex challenges. And then the idea is to have some time to open up for questions, answers, discussions, your own comments on what you're hearing. So please do make a note of your questions. If you want to use the chat to ask them, you're very welcome to, or we will also open up to have you speak them out in the session. So let's turn, I think, first. The way we're doing this session today is we're going to introduce 3 different case studies to give you a sense of what we mean when we're talking about HLP in this context, and then we'll have a colleague join us who will join things together, and then we'll open up to the questions and discussion. So first, I would like to welcome our colleague Daphne Kepetanaki, who's the Assistant Protection Officer with UNHCR in Greece. Daphne's going to speak to us about urban rental accommodation and cash support for refugees and asylum seekers in Greece. So I'll be also minding the time, and so I'll send you a message or wave or do something to let you know when you've got 2 minutes left, in case that's helpful for you. But Daphne, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jim. Just checking that you're all hearing me okay. Yeah.
Yes,
All
we
right.
hear you very well.
Welcome you all. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm going to share my screen because I do have a PowerPoint presentation. So let me see if that works.
Yes, that's working well. We see that.
Okay. Right, so I'm going to be speaking about the Estia housing program, which was operated by UNHCR between the years 2016 2021, and the main issues I will be touching upon are the advantages of urban accommodation compared to camp-like accommodation in the EU context. So just to give you a bit of background on this project, on the context and the historical background, we started the project in 2015, 2016, during the so-called refugee emergency in the EU, when over 1 million people arrived in Greece seeking safety in Europe. In their majority, they were from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. They had fled war and persecution. And after the so-called Balkan route, through which people were trying to reach Germany and other West and North European countries. So after the Balkan route closed, more than 50,000 people remained in Greece. So at that time, Greece had more or less 1,200 reception places. Now, in the EU context, there is the so-called EU Reception Directive, according to which all member states need to provide accommodation and some basic living conditions to all asylum seekers. This obligation stops when when people no longer have the asylum seeking status, which is a bit of a paradox. But for the time that they do have the asylum seeking status, member states need to provide some basic living conditions. And basically, Greece was failing to meet its obligations under the EU Reception Directive before the emergency. So then we did have the emergency. UNHCR declared level 2 emergency for Greece. And at that stage, in a summit, in an EU summit, Greece committed to the creation of 50,000 reception places to face the accommodation needs of the asylum seekers. And in this context, the Greek government committed to the creation of 30,000 accommodation places in camp-like accommodation centers, big collective centers. And UNHCR committed to the development of Estia, which was 20,000 places in rented apartments. Now, this project was funded by the EU, implemented by UNHCR in cooperation with NGOs and municipalities, and under the overall guidance of the Greek government. Some numbers. So overall, over the years from 2016 to 2021, UNHCR housed 73,000 people. We managed to have more than 27,000 accommodation places, and these were in small and large towns, cities, and islands across Greece. More or less, we had rented apartments in 16 cities and 7 islands. 200,000 beneficiaries benefited from the cash assistance, which was complementary to accommodation to the rented apartments. You see here the extensive funding of EU contributions for the implementation of the program. We had more than 1.5 million distinct cash loadings. And the way that cash was distributed was through prepaid cards issued and distributed to the asylum seekers. So that's it more or less in numbers. I'm going to quickly give you an overview of the services and what it looked like. So basically, the goal of Estia was obviously to promote independent living in the urban context. So in smaller or bigger cities, in apartments, together living together with the host community. Obviously, as asylum seekers, faced the language barrier because nobody speaks Greek basically apart from Greeks, so it's very difficult to communicate. It's also very difficult to navigate the public health system. So we had a set of services that accompanied the accommodation scheme, and these services was the psychosocial support for those who were in need, help with enrollment in schools for the children. So refugee children were actually enrolled in the neighborhood schools. We had some accompaniments to the public services, such as hospitals, especially when there were complex cases and people needed a bit more support from a social worker to access the hospital or to undertake a complex medical examination. We also supported people with undertaking complex transactions with the Greek public services, such as issuing social security numbers, the tax registration, and all that. Of course, referrals to specialized actors for GBV, for victims of torture, and so on, for legal aid. The needs of the people for food, non-food items, transportation costs were actually met by the cash assistance. So people were able to live in an apartment and at the same time receive cash assistance that they could use in the local market to buy their food, to buy their clothes, to buy their medicine and all that. The project also provided interpretation. So along with the social workers that we deployed to assist this population, obviously it goes without saying that we also had interpreters. And last but not least, there were some limited specialized assistance for persons with mental health issues. So that's overall the services. And since we are in a UN Habitat context, I thought of also giving you a bit more technical details about the standards that we had for the apartments. So these are more or less the technical specifications which were set by UNHCR in order to meet the threshold of adequate reception conditions in the context of Greece. So adequate living space for 6 persons, an average of 60, 90 square meters. The apartments needed to ensure good hygiene conditions, fresh and adequate ventilation and lighting, provision of heating, air conditioning, and so on, provision of fires for fire safety, regular disinfestations, suitable location so as to secure access to basic service. This was a challenge. We will also see it later.
On the NPC's feedback on the initiative.
Sorry.
Feedback on the different roundtable.
Second, I'll just. I think it's someone who's not muted.
Okay.
There we go. Carry on.
Thanks. Obviously, apartments needed to have a minimum of 1 toilet. Apartments were fully furnished, equipped. They needed to have adequate common spaces, and some of the apartments also needed to be accessible to people with mobility problems. UNHCR implemented this project, but not on its own. We had partners. So UNHCR selected and contracted these partners, which were both from civil society, so NGOs, as well as municipalities. We were managing the partnerships. We set up the referral mechanisms so that the asylum seekers could actually reach these apartments. And we supported departments in the implementation. We also had some direct implementation services, such as the procurement of furniture for the apartments, as well as the equipment and electrical appliances. The role of partners was to actually identify, assess, and contract the refurbished apartments in the various cities. and operate these apartments to pay the utilities, to ensure maintenance and repairs, and also to undertake all communication that had to be done with the local community to inform about this project, to inform that the refugee family is coming to live in the neighborhood and all that. Also, the partner who operated the apartment coordinated the referrals and exits into and out of the apartment, and provided all the services that I mentioned to you. So the social workers, the interpreters, the accompaniment focal points, the accommodation supervisors were under the partners. This is a map for you to see Greece and how the apartments were dispersed across the country. And this is these are our partners, basically, just for you to see the level of diversification of accommodation partners. So in terms of advantages, so I think needless to say that these apartments and living conditions, dignified living conditions in the urban context, was, by nature, it promotes self-reliance and integration. People live with the local community in cities. They're not detached from them somewhere where they cannot be seen and they cannot relate. So the reception conditions in a stay accommodation basically resembled normal life, and this is what the asylum seekers were telling us, that after having gone through very difficult times in transit countries and also travel and residing in big collective reception centers in Greece after their arrival in Greece, then entering an ST apartment was as if, to an extent, of course, living in their home. It was easier for them to make these apartments their home. Local communities and refugees lived side by side, experiencing the cultural exchange, the similarities and the differences between Greek life and the various customs of the refugees. So the STIA played a great role in the familiarization of the hosting community with the refugee population and enhanced peaceful coexistence between the communities. Very important is that the public service also became more knowledgeable and aware of the refugee issues, because these people were living among the community and were actually using the same services, the schools, the hospitals. They didn't have services as there are in the camps, where services are inside the camps and people don't interact with the services in the urban context. Also very important was the cash component, because there were financial benefits for the local community. These apartments, were owned by local people, so they received the rents. The project created employment, places for employment, social workers, and so on. And also, asylum seekers were actually using their cash assistance to buy food, clothes, medicine in the local market. So the local market really appreciated, after a point especially, the presence of asylum seekers in the cities. Very importantly also was the capacity building of partners. Some of these NGOs were knowledgeable with lengthy expertise on forced migration and on protection issues. Others weren't, and they learned along the way, along with municipalities who in Greece were initially hesitant to engage with the refugee issue.
Okay, just to say 2 more minutes.
All right, I'm nearly there. So 2 more slides. So here's a slide about the challenges we faced and the measures we took. So as I said, there was initial hesitation by local authorities to engage in the program. And what we did is that there was high-level political engagement by the Greek authorities and UNHCR. We basically launched a campaign where UNHCR, together with a relevant minister, was visiting the different cities to show the advantages of the program and convince the local authorities to engage. The pace of increase of places did not correspond to the needs. That was a challenge, and that was a critique of the problem, because it took some time to reach the capacity of 27,000 places, especially when comparing to building a camp, which can be much quicker. It was challenging to monitor due to the dispersal of places across the city. So you saw the map. So what we had to do is that we had to engage our local offices, our local partners, missions, and so on. And we also, I mean, this diversity in the program that I mentioned also, created a need for the elaboration of various SOPs from our side, from UNHCR side, in order to ensure harmonization of standards and harmonization of services. One challenge that we faced was the limited exit options. As I said, the obligation of the state stops the moment that someone's asylum case is over. So, if someone is recognized as a refugee, for example, the obligation of the state to provide living conditions stops. And then, there were limited exit options. And for this, we deeply engaged in case management and individual action plans to ensure that people had prepared themselves for the time that they had to exit the program. Cost effectiveness, it was a challenge because initially it was a very expensive program, and throughout the years we had to do gradual regularization and harmonization, continuous reassessment and readjustments in order to make it cost efficient. And the last slide, just to let you know that in 2021, UNHCR handed over ST accommodation to the Greek authorities. And it was very unfortunate that the Greek authority decided to close ST accommodation, and the only accommodation modality currently is the camp-like accommodation, the state-run collective accommodation centers. And here is a map with where they're found. They're dispersed across the country, and they're mostly in isolated remote places. We can discuss, if you want, later on, the reasons behind this decision and the challenges that asylum seekers face in Greece when residing in those big accommodation centers. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Daphne, for that fascinating presentation and talking us through the not only what happened, but the way you kind of addressed certain challenges that came up. I'm sure that was food for thought for a lot of people, and there will be questions, no doubt, later on in the session. But thank you so much, Daphne. Going to turn now to our second case study, which is around private hosting in Europe. So I'm sure there'll be some connections and links and things that we can think about together on this one. I'm really pleased to welcome Ella Serdaroglu from who's the Urban Resilience and Settlements Lead with IFRC. Ella, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jim. I'm just going to do my best to give me 1 second, please, because it's taking some time to present. In the meantime, I will, okay. Is it coming through?
Yes, it is. It's just taking its time a little bit.
Great.
There we go.
Well, then it gives me 2 minutes to introduce myself. Thank you, everyone, for choosing to be here this morning. I know that there are many sessions and other obligations that you could choose from. And that's why it's really important that we spend this time together in the most effective way as possible. So my name is Ella Serdaroglu, and as Jim has kindly mentioned, I'm working for IFRC and would like to share with you our recent experience from Europe for the Ukrainian crisis, in which we looked into hosting options as a way to supplement the reception capacity of the countries who were receiving Ukrainian refugees, and to come up with, of course, a policy document, lessons learned, and a legacy to leave behind after the program. And in that sense, you will see quite a lot of similarities with what Daphne has just shared from the rental assistance options, because rental and hosting at sometimes they're even overlapping and require the same kind of they have the same kind of components to some extent, and I'm sure that you'll be able to also draw some parallels between the two options. So the program that I'm going to talk to you about is called Safe Homes program. Just for you to have a bit of a background on it, we will not be talking that much in detail about the program, but more the lessons learned that came out of it to see if hosting could be a good option to address the housing needs of the people on the move. So I'll try to talk more about the lessons learned that you can generally apply in your own context, because I also see from the variety of the participants and their introduction that it's not many people are based in Europe, so it's important that we focus on generally applicable lessons learned. So the program in a nutshell was funded by the Asylum, Migration and Integration Fund of the European Commission. It's also known as DG Home. And as such, DG Home is not a donor that most of us working in the humanitarian world is very familiar with, because this part of the EU funding usually gets dispersed through the line ministries of the EU members. And it was actually the first time that we as IFRC network also got to work with them. So there was also a lot of learning in terms of the donor partnership in the program. The program tested the use of private hosting as a model to accommodate people who have lost their homes. So DG Home already had a guidance on it, but they had not really actually tested it. So this was the possibility to look at that guidance and look at ways of operationalizing it. As I mentioned, it was for the case of the Ukrainian refugees, but of course the guidance goes beyond, and it's also applicable to other crises where people might not have enough sufficient access to housing. So we worked in 9 countries. So the program was implemented by the Red Cross societies in Belgium, France, Ireland, Hungary, Netherlands, Luxembourg.
Ella, I just wanted to check, because I haven't seen the slide move. I don't know if others have, but just checking in case you're...
Okay, let me see, because it has moved for me, but just one second.
Okay, that's so that's...
Is it coming through?
Yeah, Safe Homes in a nutshell.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Okay, I was just there. Good that you gave me a sign. So, like I said, it was implemented in 9 national societies, 9 countries, and coordinated by the EU office of the IFRC. As I mentioned, the program at the end of it left behind as a legacy lessons learned documents, case studies, and the practitioner's handbook, which is probably most useful for you in case you want to apply this approach in your context. And I think after the presentation, I can drop the link to the page where you can see all of this in case you don't have access to the presentations. And the program ran from February 2023 to May 2024. So we had about 15 months to work on this. And I think what's maybe last point on the specifics of the program, what was really unique to it is that it didn't just focus on implementation, but it also had a research component, quite a heavy research component. That's why we also feel quite confident in the conclusions that came out of it. Moving to the next one, hope it has moved. You can just see here geographically also where we worked. and it's also in that sense good to recognize that it's not always very easy to work in 9 different contexts. Even the approach was similar because of the national context, because of the previous experience of the governments with receiving or not receiving asylum seekers, refugees, and in this case, the special case of the Ukrainian population. The specificities in each country were quite different. So you have to also, when I talk about the lessons learned, you also have to see that this is coming from quite a lot of different experiences and settings in each of the countries. Moving forward. Just for you to have a sense of what we're talking about, and also to underline the fact that hosting is, I think, only one of the many tools that we have in a toolbox, and it also needs to be applied in that way. So it's not the answer to all of the accommodation and housing problems. It's just one of the approaches that we can use, and it should be used in I know for sure that nobody's building here, but so when you see that, of course, the total numbers are quite small compared to the flow of Ukrainian population into European countries. So across 9 countries, we supported around 2,000 families directly to access accommodation, and also people who were more maybe like secondary level beneficiaries of the program through information. It was a bit more, but as you can see, it's only a fraction of the total caseload that European countries have experienced. So that is quite important to note going forward. So as I mentioned, I know this slide will be quite small for you to read. I will go through the main points. As I mentioned, the research component of the program made it quite solid for us. So we worked with data from the 9 countries, which actually used also mixed methods with particular emphasis on qualitative interviewing and focus group discussions. On top of it, there was a desk review done by our European office, and there were a number of lessons learned workshops in each of the countries where the findings were discussed. So as a result of this rigorous process, we came up with 6 main points that we can conclude around hosting as a reception tool. So the first one is when it's done well, hosting can be a very good option to provide housing to people on the move. It can provide integration opportunities and has many strengths also for the wider community. I will not go into all of them because Daphne already mentioned quite a few of them in her presentation, and they are very similar in terms of integration and inclusion of the incoming population. Secondly, hosting also provides a way to channel the goodwill that comes from the communities, emerging from the communities towards a solution that can be good for both sides. So it provides a hospitable civil society space, and acts of solidarity that arise spontaneously could be channeled into a solution. Third point, I think one of the most important ones, that's why I will go into it a bit in detail in the next slide. Successful hosting schemes must plan for the future. You have to work on the exit transitioning strategy from day one. And that's sometimes very difficult because in the heat of the moment, clearly all the attention is providing a host and do a matching and making sure that people are off the street. But without the exit strategy, even the most successful matching hosting will lead to unfavorable conditions. Fourth one, hosting is a versatile option to accommodate people who have lost their homes, because in a hosting scheme you have different families that could be matched to families that are similar with their background or family composition. So there's a lot of versatility, but we also have to note that it's not for everyone. It has to be a good match. It cannot be a go-to option to put people directly into a hosting scheme. Fifth point, hosting can only be an interim measure. So like I said, it links to the previous point. People cannot host for a long time, and people cannot be in a hosting arrangement for a long time. It's quite difficult to coexist, cohabit. So it can only be an interim measure on the path to more secure and safe housing options. And for a successful hosting program, access to rights and services is a precondition for integration and social inclusion. If there are no other programs that secure people's integration in the long run, if their status is an issue, in the case of the Ukrainians, of course, the immediate recognition of their rights and access to services was a very positive thing. Unfortunately, not every refugee or asylum seeker from a different background enjoys the same kind of access. So this has to be taken into account as well. Like I said, there were 15 specific lessons learned coming out of the program, but I would like to actually highlight a few that were a bit more maybe key and essential to the success. And what came out of our research is the key bottleneck across the board was transitioning out. Also in the rental assistance presentation, we just heard that exit strategy, that was one of the key issues. It is essential to tailor exit strategies from the very beginning. And while we do it, we have to ask the following questions. How will the guests transition to a more permanent solution? What are the measures that need to be in place to facilitate this transition? Unfortunately, also in the Safe Homes programs, we have seen cases where people had to go back to collective reception centers, and actually they were quite disadvantaged because when they were put in the hosting program, they had actually dropped off the list of the municipalities to be placed into the collective reception centers. So actually the municipalities in some cases saw them as an additional caseload that they had not planned for. So this made it quite a challenge in some cases for people to move on, even though it had come to the end of the program or the hosting arrangement. So this is super important. I cannot underline it, emphasize it enough. And of course, we all know that having a stable and adequate affordable home underpins all of the other outcomes that we can hope to have in terms of integration and inclusion. And in the case of Europe, but I think it is also at the moment a global crisis, that the ongoing housing crisis in the world, which has also been highlighted recently in the Special Rapporteur's report, is very much acting against the migrants, asylum seekers, and refugees. There's high levels of discrimination in accessing housing. That's why transitioning out of a hosting becomes extra difficult, and it needs to be very carefully managed.
Ella,
Then
we've got 2 more minutes left
2
of
more
the
minutes.
time.
Good.
So
I actually have two more slides, and quickly make a point about some enablers that are essential to make hosting a success. First of all, it's the operational capacity and robust social support structures, which means caseworkers So the human component is key for a successful matching and to make sure that people are supported, both hosts and the guests are supported in this process. People need that contact, and mental health and psychosocial support is key, but not always available. So please keep that in mind. Then maybe something that's not very obvious, a case management system in terms of information management IT infrastructure is key, because you're dealing with a lot of data privacy of hosts and guests, and that is platforms that are able to absorb this kind of high volumes and that can scale up when necessary and maybe scale down when it's not that busy. It's very, very important. It's actually a key component of the program design and not always very cheap. Then partnerships is very important. I had even a longer slide on that, but I will just touch upon it, and then maybe we can have questions if people have specific questions. It will not be possible to do this kind of a program without partnerships. Who plays what role should be based on strengths and the experiences of each of the partners. The partnership has to be very flexible and evolving, but most importantly, we need to learn to work with one another. And it's very difficult to forge partnerships when people are already on the move. So there needs to be quite a lot of contingency planning beforehand and preparation on partners' side if you want to go into hosting. So like this, Safe Homes was a lot of improvisation on the go, but this is a key lesson learned as well. And other considerations will be around financial incentives, agreements. We're in the HLP discussion group, like, do you need a written agreement? Not. This all depended really on each of the contexts, but still it's one of the things that we need to consider. And peer support among the hosts also came up as a key component that needs to be looked into. I think I will just stop there, but in case there are questions, we can discuss. And I also see that the report and the lessons learned, it's in the chat. So thank you very much, and I will leave it there. Let me stop sharing as well.
Thanks so much, Ella. That was very, very interesting and really great to see that focus on the kind of the lessons and some of the key issues coming up. So yeah, thank you so much for that. I shared a link to the lessons learned, but if you've got other things you want to share, please do put them in the chat there. And for you, dear colleagues on the call, please, if you have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. So when we come to that section, they are there ready, or hold them back and you can ask them direct as well. And just to remind you that these case studies are all part of this UN Habitat report. I've just put the link in the chat for that, so you can read about those and sort of see them in that wider context as well. Great, thanks. So we're going to move to our third case study now. I'm really pleased to be joined by Eleonora Serpi, who's the Associate Programme Management Officer with UN Habitat, and also the Acting Co-Coordinator for the Global Housing, Land and Property Area of Responsibility. So welcome, Eleonora, and you're going to be talking to us about recording and safeguarding Syrian refugees' HLP rights and the supporting evidence. So yes, Eleonora, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jim, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. I will be presenting this project on behalf of the broader project team, and I will start giving you a little bit of background on the context. Since 2011, over 14 million Syrians have been displaced inside and outside Syria. Most of them left behind their houses, their businesses, and their lands, with a high number of properties that have been then occupied without consent, illegally bought and sold, destroyed, or contaminated by explosives. Despite the changes since December last year, where the return intentions of Syrians definitely increased compared to the previous years, Syrians still indicated that the lack of secure access to their properties and the uncertainty of the status of these properties is still hindering their willingness to return. And these mark how important tenure security it is for the restitution of properties to the legitimate owners. These are human rights, and this is a precondition to safe, voluntary, and dignified return, and for broader reconciliation and peace. Since 2020, within this context, since 2020, UN Habitat has been implementing this project in 2 locations, in 2 countries, in Lebanon and Iraq, with the aim of protecting the housing and property rights and documents of the Syrian refugees. The project targets 98,000 Syrian households, which corresponds to almost 500,000 people in the 2 countries. The project aims to record claims of Syrian refugees to their residential and non-residential properties back in Syria, while doing so collecting and safeguarding copies of existing supporting evidence. And these include a wide range of evidence, both cadastral, legally recognized and non-legally recognized evidence to house, land and property. The project also aims to improve gender equality and facilitate the process of claiming back properties by the heirs by including all the members of the households in the HLP claims and not only the head of households. And the project is also creating a digital database where all these claims are being recorded and stored. And this database can be used in the future for dispute resolution and for restitution processes to the legitimate owners. And while doing so, of course, the project also aimed at increasing awareness as well as capacity on HLP. Before we go more in detail in the project, what is an HLP claim? An HLP claim is an assertion of a claimant house, land and property rights to the submission of a claim supported when available by supporting evidence. Claims are usually submitted by the person with the stronger tenure relationship to the property claim. But as I was mentioning before, claims also allow to register all the household members together with the claimant. A claimant can submit multiple claims, and multiple claims can be submitted for the same property. And this would, of course, originate competing claims that would need to be resolved through verification and dispute resolution mechanism, which is not something that it has been done under this project. And why it is important to collect these claims, as I was saying before, collecting and safeguarding copies of HLP documents help mitigate the risk of further damages and losses and create a basis for future restitution, compensation, and dispute resolution efforts, as well as to facilitate repair and reconstruction of houses. If we look more in detail at the project activities, first of all, we developed the approach and the digital tool for the project. We identified the target communities and the partners to implement the project in the field. We developed the capacities of the implementing partners. We then mobilized the communities, and we started after collecting HLP claims and supporting evidence. Based on the claims and the evidence collected, we then issued and distributed claim certificates, and all of these data is now being stored in a database, and it's being used. It's been a first round of analysis has already been done, and a second will be done at the end of the project in June. And this data is being used for advocacy purposes as well as to inform programming for the broader response inside and in South Syria. When we talk about the digital tool, so the STDM, the social tenure domain model, is the tool that has been used for collecting the HLP claims. STDM is a proper, participatory, and affordable land tool for recording people-to-land relationship along the continuum of land rights. This tool has been developed by the Global Land Tool Network and UN Habitat. And in practice, what this tool allows to do, it allows to connect the party, and in this case, the respondent or the claimant, to a spatial unit. So for example, land or a built-up property or a mix of the two, and linking the two through a social tenure relationship. So the relationship that the party has to the unit, which could be, for example, full ownership, joint ownership, long-term use, and so on. And it also allows to register and upload supporting evidence to corroborate the claim. So for example, as we're saying, it could be cadastral documents as well as legal or non-legal documents. The project allowed to register, and here we can see quickly an overview of the documents, of the evidence that has been accepted, and it's over 47 type of evidence. The tool also allowed to geolocalize the claim to the property in Syria using Google Maps. So how did we develop the tool? STDM is a highly customizable tool, and the customization is done in step. For this project, we firstly developed the questionnaire, and the questionnaire reflects the project objectives, and it is adapted to the community on the ground where the enumeration is taking place. This questionnaire, of course, is field tested, and once a final questionnaire is available, it is digitized, and in this case has been digitized and uploaded into Kobo Collect, and we use Kobo Collect as the app to fill the questionnaires. We then developed the core data model, which allowed to feed the data collected through Kobo into STDM. And STDM has then been used also to design and issue the claim certificates that have been distributed to the beneficiaries. All of this has been regulated through a project data management and protection protocol. This protocol describes the rights, the roles, and the responsibility of the different actors. It describes how the data should be handled, including how it should be stored and used in the future. UN Habitat is the data custodian for this project. And we are now in the process of discussing an agreement with IOM for them to store a copy of the data in their HLP vault until a more institutional home is found for this data. Oh, sorry. So when the tool has been, after the development of the tool, the different partners and project personnel have been trained on the tools. We also developed a handbook, a paperback handbook for enumerators to guide the enumerators in the field to fill the questionnaire to ensure that the data was consistent. And we also developed a project protocol where we described all the tools that have been developed for this project, and that can be then used by other partners to replicate the project in different project locations. The project has been implemented by partners in Lebanon, while it has been implemented directly by UN Habitat in Iraq. Once the implementing partners have been trained, we then move to the mobilization of the target community, providing the beneficiaries with information about the activities, the expected outcomes and impact of the project. We held awareness raising sessions on HLP, and we carry out targeted visibility activities about the project to ensure that it was clear to the beneficiaries and to prevent the spreading of misinformation about the project and the use of the data collected. Also, very important was to maintain a continuous dialogue with the relevant national and local authorities and community leaders. The data collection followed two approaches, door-to-door enumeration and at the community centers. The two approaches have been used in different locations. First, the project started with strictly a door-to-door enumeration, but especially in Lebanon, after the project has been ongoing for a few years and the beneficiaries are aware of the project and the interest increased, we also witnessed a greater willingness of the beneficiaries to go to the community centers to register the claims. Although, of course, as I was saying, this was not possible in all of the location because some constraints also were faced by the beneficiaries, for example, the cost linked to the travel to the community center. So this was, the different approaches were used together to meet the needs of the different locations where the project was implemented. This is an overview of the claims that have been registered. So as we can see, the green and the yellow dot represent the properties that have been claimed in Syria. In yellow, the properties that have been claimed from Syrian refugees in Iraq, and in green, the properties that have been claimed by Syrian refugees in Lebanon. So far, the project has registered almost 32,000 claims for 18,000 households, meaning that at this point, 70,100 people have registered HLP claims. And the project, as I was saying, is still ongoing in Lebanon and will conclude field enumeration in the next couple of months. So these numbers are still expected to grow. And here, just to give you a bit an overview, these are some of the snapshots of the maps that we have prepared for the different governorates in Syria. For the first two phases of the project, this is Aleppo, this is Al-Saqqa, and we also have Damascus, and we also prepared for the other governorates. And here I will not really go into too much into details about the different results achieved in the two countries, in Lebanon and Iraq, but I would like to bring your attention to the gender component of the project and how successful it has been in ensuring that both women and men have the HLP claim registered. So it's a almost 50-50 share when we look at the people with HLP claims, and it's actually slightly higher when we look at the HLP at the claimants who submitted HLP claims. If we look, for example, in Lebanon, 52% of the claims have been submitted by female claimants. And this is thanks to the efforts of the team in the field, especially during the mobilization of the community and the awareness raising sessions. And here again are some of the maps here. These are snapshots of where the beneficiaries who submitted the HLP claims are found in Lebanon. And this is a snapshot for Tripoli. And this is the results for Iraq. And this is a map of where the claims have been collected in DOMS camps. Following the enumeration, well, actually, in parallel to the enumeration, we have been distributing certificates. So far, we've distributed over 29,000 HLP claim certificates, and these can be used, as I was saying before, in the future by the claimants to support processes related to restitution, compensation, dispute resolution, and other recovery efforts. To conclude, so in the short term, we will finalize the project activities, and we will disseminate the analysis of the finding to inform programming and the way forward. In the long term, we aim to replicate and upscale the project activities inside and outside Syria, and support HLP transitional intervention in Syria, including transitional justice mechanism, aiming at restitution and compensation, the resolution of disputes related to HLP, confirming HLP rights, verifying HLP rights for housing repair and reconstruction, and reconstructing and reissuing cadastral records and all the HLP records to also update the cadastre and the property registries. And with this, I close. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks so much, Eleonora. Thank you for that, and great to see the kind of the overview and the links with all of the work being done in the different countries, and also highlighting the different ways in which the STDM and other relevant tools are being used, and particularly the 47 types of evidence being used. A very interesting kind of list of all the things that might be considered in this process as well. So thank you, Eleonora, for that. Again, if you have questions, think about those, and we will come to questions following our last intervention, which comes from Ombretta Tempera, who's the Chief of the Land, Housing and Shelter section from UN Habitat. Welcome, Ombretta, and over to you as you draw things together, connect the dots from what we've heard. But yeah, Ombretta, over to you.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you everyone for attending this interesting session. I will present briefly a document that we have launched a few months ago that looks at basically drawing on some of the examples that have been presented here and other relevant examples to actually give a sort of an overview of a menu of housing, land and property solutions that are useful to resolve and prevent displacement. Internal displacement, but also displacement in general, as at the end, we know that practical solutions at the end do not necessarily vary very much for the different category of displaced people or people in needs. Let me see. So you'll see here on the right the document, so you can download it, of course, and find it. I hope you'll find it useful. The type of solutions that we have articulated were categorized in three main areas. Land and HLP solution for humanitarian intervention. Those are a bit more on the longer term, and then those that are actually meant to prevent and mitigate future displacement. A quick overview, we know overall already the trends, but these are increasing and majority, the displacement is increasing, the majority of people are displaced internally. We know also that when people are displaced as refugees or internally displaced, they often compete for the same housing and land solution with other category of people that are also on the rise. We know that there are migrants. Of course, not all migrants are targeting the same necessarily, are not necessarily in the same income group, but in many countries they are. And therefore, some of the solutions that we present, we need to be aware that will also be appealing to other migrant, to other categories like migrants or youth or urban poor, depending on the context. We also need to keep in mind that actually climate-induced human mobility is really very much on the rise, and the numbers are going to increase, and some countries, some locations are more vulnerable to this than others. So it's really important that we also do some projection and forecast and scenario development to know what we will be dealing with. And also, lastly, I mean, similar to what's said on the migrants, there are also 1 billion slum dwellers globally that probably, when we put in place a solution, particularly in urban areas, will be also competing for the same. Sometimes we look at, anyway, we should look at and understand these different trends together. Contextualizing displacement, as we all know, there are different drivers. Of course, conflict and violence is one. Climate change, as I was saying, is another one. But then there are also large-scale human rights violation, abuses, and human suffering that are resulting in the same effect. And maybe a bit under the radar sometimes, there are actually macroeconomic and social inequalities that are really driving these dynamics. So as I was saying, we have categorized the solution in 3 types, for humanitarian protection, for recovery and development, and for resilience. And these need to be looked at in parallel. I mean, obviously there is a time sequencing to some extent, but often because contexts are face protracted displacement, and sometimes some areas of the country move towards maybe more recovery while others fall back into the humanitarian phase. These solutions should generally be looked at in parallel. I'm going to scroll through them and talk to some of these. So in the first category, the solutions that are really useful in the phase of humanitarian protection is, of course, understanding very well what are the needs and the numbers. And also have a clear understanding of what is the legal and institutional frameworks that are present on the ground, both in terms of statutory law, but also customary laws, other types of legal frameworks, because especially, in some contexts where actually these frameworks are very well developed, they could really provide entry points or create barriers for solutions that we might propose if we don't know about them, particularly, for those of us who come in as international that may be required to take decision in a very short time without having really the time to understand fully the framework. It's good to have a mapping of the options to sheltering displaced people. That's quite obvious, but sometimes otherwise we would fall into default solution that maybe are not applicable or not the best in the specific context. You see on the right, there are the case studies that are referenced in the publication or really unpacked in the document. So you have also some ideas on how this in practice played out. The most, of course, typical case is when we need to shelter people away from their home. There are sheltering people on private land is very often the case, but is also important and probably more relevant in increasingly urbanized context, or maybe operating in areas where the area is already quite built up and developed, not so much for rural area, but really more for urban, peri-urban area. We need to try to increase the shelter offer by the host community, and therefore enabling also the mechanism for making this available. Often, especially the refugees, but in many cases also stigma prevents internally displaced people to access actually shelter offers that exist within host community. This is also important to look at other type of properties and lands that are beyond shelter, right? Land for agriculture, livestock, and domestic animals. Also access to communal resources like forests and grazing land. These are often very, very key for the resilience of people, and hence they really impact, if they're not there, their livelihood and their sustainability. So as humanitarians, sometimes we focus more on shelter, but it's important that we also look at solutions for these other types of land and properties. Definitely preparing the ground for return and restitution, as explained in the previous case of Syria, is crucial, because the more time passes from displacement, the more difficult it is to actually uphold this right of return and restitution. And there are, of course, access to justice and dispute resolution and prevention of forced eviction remain key intervention. If we look at a little bit more at the recovery development phase, we see really the need of having area-based assessment, urban and neighborhood profile, to actually understand where we are intervening, where are the opportunity of support, And we can't really do that without a spatial understanding of the location where the displaced are or they need to settle or be resettled. There are a range of solutions that are available in area of origin or return, so assuming people will go back. So definitely, return, protecting the rights of people in the area of land rights, HLP rights in the area of origin is a key element. But we also need to understand that actually many of those who have left might have been landless and homeless to start with. So even if we look at providing solution in areas of origin, the type of intervention actually are more similar to those would be applicable when we provide housing and land and properties to people who are from a different areas. So this is to be kept in mind when we plan for return, and it's not only restitution. There are also other type of solutions that need to come in. Very often, actually more often, is needing to provide housing in areas of current displacement or in third location. Solutions there are quite similar. We see really that it's important, and probably the category that has more prospect of impact are the mechanisms that increase the offer of adequate housing that are available to the displaced. So where families, for example, and individuals in host community rent out rooms or plots of land to the IDPs. Of course, there are also cases where new houses are built by individuals then to be rented. So this creates a sort of market that needs to be obviously monitored, needs to be kept affordable, and need to be supported because ultimately with the scale that we see, especially with those who will be displaced by climate, public funding or donor money, especially in the current scenario, will not be enough to cover the needs. And of course, we need to incentivize host family to receive incentives to repair, extend their property, or making them aware with some risk mitigation measures to the displaced people. It's also important to actually look at informal settlements to transform, retrofit, and regularize them when possible, because these areas generally have a big potential of offering solution for displaced people. But of course, this solution need to be adequate. So we need to see how we can work with what we have to make it suitable to the needs. And overall, I mean, at the end, the housing sector needs to function for all those who need housing, because housing is a human right, so it should not only work for the owners or the host community. So it's important actually to understand the housing sector and how it works in context of displacement, fragility, and make sure there are some adjustment at the policy level to make it actually suitable to that needs. As well, the functioning of the land administration sector in the same category. I think, Jim, you're prompting me to wrap up.
Getting just going to say 2 minutes. So yes, then we can get into the questions. Yeah,
definitely. Thank you. So now more maybe on the prevention or the resilience side, there is a lot that can be done actually to first identify the causes and risk of future displacement, because there is a lot that can be achieved with mitigation, intervention, and that's of course very much cheaper. And preparedness. Many countries have this, but basically map the areas at risk of displacement, develop scenarios, and develop protocols and preparedness plans, or where people can be accommodated, in case of floods or outbreak of conflict or different type of drivers of displacement. And definitely, as I was mentioning before, at the end, the housing sector needs to be conceptualized and tailored to the fact that there will be an increase of globally of population movement. So people will be there for a long time, like owners of host communities, but a whole range of people will need short-term housing option that maybe need different type of mechanism and legal instrument to make them affordable and available when needed. And of course, we should actually try to mitigate the cause of displacement in the first place, looking at the root causes. But if we look at land, for example, addressing the historical grievances related to land that are often, those that make conflict, for example, and dispute sparkle again and result in mass displacement. All these, of course, require some enabling environment interventions that, of course, is knowledge, advocacy, financing, need to work with the other stakeholders that are there. But overall, I would say a paradigm shift, meaning, not look at housing and land solution for displaced people really just for the emergency, but have the whole housing and land system work better for all, including the poor and the displaced. Thank you. And with this, I will give the floor back to you, Jim.
So much, Umbretta. Thanks for sort of drawing some of those themes together. And I think that one of the things that really comes through for me and in all the presentations actually has been this role of like partnerships and working together and trying to sort of break down, I guess, some of the silos or the ways of working that mean that we sometimes limit our response to these different categories when we need to be thinking much more about how we kind of join these things up and shift towards that. But yeah, thank you, Umbretta, for that. And you will see in the chat a lot of links to the various reports that have been referred to. Please do have a look at those. They're very good, interesting reads, and we'll sort of build on what you've heard today. So we have about 14 minutes left for questions, answers, discussion, comment. It might be that some of you have heard something that relates to the work you're doing. It might be that you want to find out more about the work that's been happening in Greece, across Europe, and also in this sort of Syrian response to the Syrian context as well. So please, would you feel free to put your questions in the chat, raise a hand. Jamal, I see you've posted a question there. Would you like to say it out loud, or I can easily just read from what you've written there? But you're welcome to speak.
Hi, Jim. I'll appreciate if you can just read it for me. Thanks.
Sure. All right, I will. So Jamal says, excellent presentations. Congratulations on the progress being made. The question to the panel, in view of the bottlenecks to transitioning to more secure tenure arrangements, as highlighted by Ella and the IFRC, and the need for eventual formal recognition of documented rights, as highlighted by UN Habitat and by the STDM, what do you consider the greatest roadblock at this juncture, and how do you envision getting past these in the short to medium term? So highlighting that bottleneck around transition to more secure tenure, and also working towards that formal recognition of documented rights. So what would you say are the greatest roadblocks at this juncture, and how might you get past those? So that's a question to everyone. What I'm going to do is also take the question from Jose as well, and then we can come to the panel in turn and you can answer. Over to you, Jose.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for this fantastic session. This is really great. I was thinking when Umbretta was talking about the paradigm shift, that, you know, we already had a paradigm shift after the waves of restitutions in the Balkans, no? Because we had in the Balkans in the 90s and 2000 restitution mechanisms that were very effective, but were also very expensive, you know, and also required a lot of political support. So my question is how, you know, how realistic or how much political support we will need to bring back that type of mechanisms, not to a case like Syria, because I listened to the Syria presentation, but it was not clear whether actually the remedy was in place, no? So if the remedy is not in place and you take a big amount of claims, no, then that raises also a lot of questions, no? What expectations you are raising with IDPs and refugees, etc., etc. So anyway, I mean, a lot to think about. Congratulations to all. But if you can reflect about maybe Umbretta or Eleonora on, you know, how optimistic are you about restitution in this context of, you know, funding crisis, human rights concerns of all kinds, not the least the rise of populist movements that don't care about human rights at all, etc., etc. So over to Eleonora or on Bretta.
Thank you for that. So there's two quite big questions there. So we will turn to the panel now and have a response. So there's and you're welcome to respond to the parts that feel relevant for you. So I'll take it in turn. So Daphne, would you like to respond? We have Jamal's question, which was looking at the bottlenecks to transitioning to more secure tenure arrangements and sort of moving towards formal recognition of documented rights. And then so that question around sort of roadblocks, what are the things that are kind of stopping us and how do we get past them? So and you're very welcome also to comment on the other question around restitution and how optimistic are you about that at this time, given all that's going on. So Daphne, I'll turn to you first, and I'll come to you, Eleonora, and Alberta.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to be brief because I can only talk about the EU context. That's my expertise. But the main concern here, obviously, is the political narrative around migration and asylum seekers and refugees, and the increased restrictive policies. So we see a tendency of in decision making of seeing forced migration, seeing the presence of refugees as something that is temporary, as something that should be a transitional. We only respond in emergencies. There's a lack of long-term policy making. At least this is very evident in South Europe, where politicians here and state authorities basically sometimes also have a narrative that if we give too much, then people will stay. So the more restrictive your policies are, people will want to move on and leave the country. So they play around the onward movement. In the case of Greece, as I said in my presentation, the Greek authorities decided to close down the urban accommodation scheme, and there was a political narrative around it as being too luxurious, comparing it to the standards that the local community was living in. And they decided to place all asylum seekers in remote camps. So, and for us in Greece, it was the first time that we actually saw camps being used for any population group, which has many challenges for the population, but also for the local community and for the future of these people. But we have tried to provide counter arguments because there are many disadvantages. But there seems to be, for me, the bottleneck is basically the political narrative that is going more to the right and to the far right at this stage in Europe, along with statements by politicians about greater control. People should not be living in the cities among the local community. Now, what to do about it? The only thing to do about it is to always try to show the advantages and the disadvantages that these policies have. For example, for us, the creation of ghettos, it's not to the benefit of anyone in this society. Or, for example, we took advantage of the local authorities who lost when Estia closed down, and they lost the financial benefits they had from asylum seekers. So we've been using these arguments all the time to show that, along with arguments about demographics, along with arguments about the needs of the economy and the markets for more working hands. So there's no point in just keeping people locked in remote camps. But yeah, that's a bit my thoughts about it. It's a very, very difficult context, very politicized, but we need to keep up. Thanks.
Daphne, thank you for that. Ella, over to you. Up to you how you respond to which parts of all the questions, but yes, over to you.
Yeah. I think I will also continue on what Daphne has mentioned. I think the biggest bottleneck, the biggest obstacle is around the political willingness, at least if we're looking at migration towards the global north west. It might take a different turn if we talk about like internal displacement or the other way around. So political narrative is definitely not helping. It's also being actually used to put the blame around the inadequacy of the housing stock on the migrants, especially in Europe, also in America. I think it's been used to create this narrative against migration. However, I don't think that the shortage, especially of the housing stock, has been due to the migration. It's more different social housing policies that have not been followed up on in the last maybe 15, 20 years, if not longer. So I would say political narrative, the fact that there is just not enough housing is also a big obstacle for making a rental and hosting arrangements in the West a success. And I think from a programmatic point of view, it's also quite, maybe that's also what Daphne meant as being expensive. It's very labor intensive, which means that it becomes a very customized, almost a boutique solution if we talk about hosting. And sometimes it's against maybe the authorities' reflex to come up with a solution that will just fit everyone, which ends up being not serving anybody's specific needs. So those would be the obstacles. Well, in terms of maybe solutions and how we can get over it is if we could use the same rental or hosting arrangements during, let's say, peacetime to address maybe other issues around accessing adequate housing, around maybe housing inclusion or homelessness, to deal with this kind of issues, then the programming approach would not look like a new thing when you have to scale up. The partnerships would already be there, the systems would already be there, and then we would only have to look at the ways of increasing the numbers. So I think it shouldn't be seen as something that only has to be done when you have like big migration flows, big caseloads of people coming. And of course, it's also around policies and regulations that need to be in place. For example, one very practical issue is the data protection laws in Europe that are very good, but very difficult to work with if you have especially multiple partners trying to share data. That's something that needs to be taken care of with agreements and all that beforehand. So I would say, like everything else, preparedness at an institutional and programmatic level is still one of the ways that we can at least mitigate the pressures of this kind of programming. I'll leave at that. I might have left out some points, but yeah, there are other questions coming in.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you. Thanks so much. That's really helpful. So we have just a couple of minutes left, and I want to turn to Eleonora and Ombretta to respond to the, well, to that question, but also the wider question around restitution and how optimistic you are. And there's some related questions in the chat asking about the sort of legal recognition of the claim certificates that you mentioned, Eleonora, like what status do those certificates have and how are they used? And you can see those in the chat there. So if you'd like to sort of include that in your answers, and I know, Ombretta, you are familiar with this as well, so please feel free. But yes, Eleonora, Ombretta, both of you, I'll turn to you now and yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Jim. So briefly, without repeating what has already been mentioned by Daphne and by Ella, additional bottlenecks that we definitely envision are the great number of caseload that will have to be reviewed and that will go to courts, and the fact that courts and the judicial systems are not designed to take up such a big caseload, and therefore this calls for transitional justice mechanism and ideally treating these disputes from a more taking a more administrative direction rather than a judicial one to streamline and facilitate the process. Definitely also these will come at formalization usually comes with a high cost, and this is potentially another barrier. Another issue, for example, if we take the case of Syria, is how the current cadastre is structured. Is very the records to be in the cadastres are very detailed and at the moment outdated, and there are parallel. There are 2 parallel cadastres in the country, plus many records are outside of it. So it will really mean thinking of how we can create a common transitional HOP platform that can, at this point, accommodate the different evidence that we have, including the one that have been collected into the project, but that can include also what are now the records included in the temporary registries, or a different kind of records that then can fit into a fit for purpose cadastre after all these records have been verified, and this would allow to update the current cadastres. So this is, for example, another approach. Another bottlenecks definitely also there will be will need to be considered are potentially like discrimination and so on. Looking at the questions in the chat, I saw some. So quickly, the claim certificates only testify that a due process took place. So these have not. These are not recognized by the government. We have not worked together with the government for this project, and we worked only outside the country. So we are now, as UN Habitat, together with partners, discussing what is a potential way forward inside Syria, and how to use this evidence that we are collecting and that we hope to continue collecting in the coming years, also upscaling and replicating the project in other countries and inside Syria. But this is a whole other conversation that will take much more time. But we are looking into understanding of how a transitional justice mechanism can take place in Syria. So also to respond to Jose's question, this is something that, since you were asking about the expectations of the refugees and the beneficiaries, this is something that has been clarified as part of the awareness raising and outreach that we're doing with the project. So to make sure that the expectations are managed. Thank you, and over to Ombretta.
Thanks. And also just to say, Ombretta, given the time, we'll give this, you're having the final word as well. So feel free to turn this into a magical closing moment.
No, I think this was not part of my what I signed up for. No, I'm joking. But anyway, thanks. I think most of the points were mentioned. In terms of the bottleneck, I just want to add that in many contexts, actually, when you look at, because there are 2 ways, right, that you can provide tenure security for displaced people. One is to provide directly to them the housing or the land, straight basically from government, right, through market, or you can strengthen the secondary rights that they have to properties that are owned by someone else. Right, so you can work on the legal agreement, on the private hosting, or temporary agreement. So these necessitate the fact that the underlying owners, whether this is the public, the government, or private owners, have their rights recognized, and that because otherwise you are making an agreement between 2 counterparts that also none of them has tenure security. One is the displaced, obviously, but the other is the host community, the owner, the government. And in many contexts, we see that because of the land administration, the property registration being so informal, unregulated, disputed, this is this is also a bottleneck that then doesn't allow, for example, somebody who maybe has a home that is in an informal settlement is not able even to rent it out. So it's really a system approach that needs to be addressing, HLP solution for displaced people. And I fully agree with what was said regarding making private hosting not a boutique solution, because this is, I think, has potential if it's well structured and if the different providers are brought together and they can share an approach and solution, really has the potential to go to scale. But indeed, it needs to be something that is existing and then can be scaled up for specific categories, and always obviously strengthening the role of the third party to de-risk this solution for the owners that will be entering in this such agreement. Lastly, maybe to add, as Eleonora said, in this project, the STDM certificates do not have legal recognition. They are meant just to be a bridge to the other types of evidence, some of which might be legal, some not. But I would like to flag that in many other contexts where we work, well, of course, normally this type of bottom-up, community-based land and property registration systems they don't start as a legal document, but they can be incrementally recognized and upgrading and also feed into the legal documents. And this happens, obviously there are decrees, but then you need to work on the protocols and the processes through which there can be maybe additional steps of verification on these certificates that are temporary certificate issued for them to be accepted and transformed into fully registered records. And this is, we have this example, for example, in Iraq, when STDM, another project in Iraq, where STDM certificates were actually then recognized through legal decree by the government as upgradable into full TAPU certificates. And then there is now a project looking exactly at that and looking at the legal framework and ironing out the legal process to do that. This is an approach that overall we advocate, bottom-up, pro-poor, community-based solution that then can be incrementally upgraded to become more sustainable and formalized. This would be my answer. And I mean, just to close, I still give you back the floor, Jim. But I think in the current scenario of really changing funding streams, the global arena being more fragmented, the responsibility are going back a lot more to the national and really at the local level. So there is really an opportunity here to look at how this solution that we've been talking about can be taken up more at the community level and work with local actors to provide answers, with the resources available and really localized variation of the HLP solution that exist, that are in place, and many of which are not really documented, because we, of course, as international communities or humanitarian actors, we are particularly good at documenting our own approaches, but in fact, there are a wide range of solutions that are existing in local communities that maybe we don't know necessarily about. We documented some of it in another publication that was on customary HLP solutions, but acknowledging that this is a gap and maybe something we could make a bit better attempt to research and document really community-led solutions that have the opportunity to go to scale to provide HLP answers in the current financial and multilateral scenario. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Ombretta. And just want to say thank you to all of the speakers, to Daphne, to Ella, to Eleonora, and to Ombretta. Thank you for joining and creating a very fascinating, rich discussion and sort of bringing to life the way we need to think about the links between what happens in the crisis humanitarian moment and that sort of move towards solutions, and that kind of resilience that we need to be building all the time in different ways, and the links between the crisis that faces people in terms of their homes and housing generally, and also what then happens when there is some kind of crisis, disaster, conflicts that means people are on the move, and those kind of troubles and issues are kind of exacerbated and made far worse. So yeah, thank you for joining the session. Please do, colleagues, have a look in the chat. There's some great resources there and some really interesting discussion in terms of the sort of the legal frameworks as well. So please do look in there, and just want to say thank you all for joining us today. We will be putting the recording, I think, probably on the AOR web pages to be discussed and finalised, but we'll look to share that so that others can get the benefit of the session, and we'll include a short report with some resources in there as well. But yeah, that's from me, over and out. Thanks for joining. I did put a link in case you're not on our mailing list and would like to be, or would like to look at the web pages as well for the HLP AOR in terms of seeing other resources that are available. But yeah, thanks again for everyone to join us this morning or this afternoon. And yeah, hopefully see you at some of the other events. There's an HLP focused due diligence session in about 4 hours time, so it'd be great if you can join that as well. It'll be very interesting, I'm sure. Okay, good. Thanks, and great to see you all, and have a good rest of your day. Cheers.